Hello everyone, welcome back to Terra Mystica. It's kind of, I'm not going to have any actual Terra Mystica gameplay in this video. It's kind of more of an update slash announcement. First of all, the season is finished. I wasn't planning to do a recap for this season, but I did squeeze out a win here, which is to say that the game I was waiting for finished in a way that was favorable to me. Not as well as I predicted, because I thought Oren were going to have 3 more points than this, because when I was doing the shipping calculation, I computed correctly that they would increase their network to be of size to be worth 15 points, and I thought that meant they would add 15 points to their current projected score. But they already had 3 projected network, because at 4 they were tied with the halflings, who at that time had only 4 network. So those 3 points I was wrong about, but fortunately the Darklings were still ahead and the Oran were too. Very, very close game. Anyway, so next season of the tournament we will be playing in Division 4. Very exciting. The other thing that I want to do in this video is announce so I found out that, I guess I knew about this, but had not really been inclined to join, and now I am. There's the Terra Mystica tournament is it starts every 2 months, and it usually takes 1 to 2 months to finish the games. And there is another league, sort of less. It's much newer. It started like in April or something. This is only season 3. But it's been going on the off months in between. So like when Terra Mystica tournament is a month old, this thing starts, and it runs for 2 months. But so far, apparently, the people playing in it are the same time settings are used, but the players who are inclined to play in this apparently have a habit of being faster. So people are often finishing their games for this in just a month, so that they anyway. Now, this month, I finished my Terra Mystica tournament games in a month, which was great. The previous months, it had been like, 7 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. So anyway, the reason I have the Fire and Ice rules up is because this other tournament is the Fire and Ice League tournament. I don't know what it's called. It's played with the expansion, the Fire and Ice expansion rules. So I thought we would take some time today to talk through what the expansion rules are, so that I don't have to cover them in my faction selection videos for the next season, which will be a Fire and Ice season. If you already know the rules, you can go ahead and just jump to the first video in that playlist, and hopefully I'll be smart enough to figure out how to put a link to that on the screen somehow at this time. So if you see that and you don't care to hear about how the Fire and Ice factions work, you can just click that link. Okay, so what's the deal with Fire and Ice? Fire and Ice adds, you could say 3 new colors, but maybe it's more accurate to say 6 new factions. And it also adds one other thing that is sort of easy to cover first, because it's generic to factions. Which is that there is one additional final scoring bonus that it's scored the same way as network, right? First place gets 18, second place gets 12, third place gets 6, and it's you share points among ties. And this is in addition to network scoring, and they're all related to your network. So the simplest one is they're basically some attribute of the structures that you have, and those structures must be connected via your network for it to count. So there are 4 different kinds of final scoring, and you randomly choose one each game. But all of them have in common the property that they care about buildings that are connected to each other via your shipping network. So the simplest one is distance. Is that this one? Yeah, distance. So it's just how far apart you can have any two connected structures. So in this game, mermaids and fakirs are equally far away. Witches are not quite as far away, and who the Giants, Chaos Magicians? I don't know. They have no points. Giants. Okay. So that's one of the final scoring. What do you call it? Bonuses, I guess. Stronghold and Sanctuary distance is a more constrained version of the same thing. You get no points unless you have built a stronghold and a sanctuary, and they are connected by your network. And if you have done such a thing, then whoever has the furthest apart stronghold and sanctuary wins that category. So I guess in this example, mermaids and fakirs have not built their sanctuary, so they get no points. And witches get 18, and giants get 12 for this. Next up is outposts. So you're rewarded for building on the edge of the map. So having... Is it accurate to say having fewer than 6 adjacent tiles? I think is what is an accurate definition of border. Of course, we count river as a tile, so this is not on the border. But this is. It has only 2 adjacent tiles, and this is. It has 4 adjacent tiles, and so on. So these all have to be connected to each other, but as the maximum number of connected structures on the border. And this doesn't have to be the same as your total. Like if your shipping network were disconnected, you could have like 2 structures on the border that are next to each other, but not part of your main network, and they're connected to each other. And you can also have like a main network of size 8 or whatever, and those can be different things. You don't have one shipping network, really. You have some number of sub-networks, and you're scored for the size of the largest one, and the size of the largest one, the largest number of outposts in a network. And finally, settlements. So this is the directly adjacent structures, just the number of them that you have. So in clusters, basically. This is a cluster, one single cluster of connected buildings. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So fakirs has 7 settlements, or clusters, if you call them that way. Mermaid towns count as the bridge across counts it as 1 cluster because it's part of a town. You can't have a town that's part of 2 different clusters. Okay, so that's the final scoring. The other thing, actually, to look at, there's one other thing I wanted to show you, which is another difference of, this is not a feature of Fire and Ice, but just of this league. This is the Terra Mystica AI, don't worry about it, it'll look nice and normal Snellman stuff when we're playing, but this is, it's on a different map. So we have kind of these 2 not clusters, 2 large central land masses, and some kind of scattered stuff around the edges. This is the Fjords map. I'm not totally up on my Terra Mystica history, but this is one of 2 maps which I believe were kind of designed and play tested by the community over the course of, I don't know, a long time, years, and then eventually included as part of the Terra Mystica like actual distributable board game. I believe the expansion Merchants of the Seas features the 2 community maps, Loon Lakes and Fjords. Again, I could be wrong about the details of this. I know Fjords is community driven. I think Loon Lakes was, but you know, both well before my time. Fjords was only finalized last year, I think. Anyway, so we'll be playing on this map. So there's a bunch of, you know, shake up already about, like, geez, what factions even have good territory? What's the word I'm thinking of? Good space, good hexes? I don't know, on this map. So I practiced a little bit against the AI, not a ton, just to get a feel for how the expansion factions work and how the map works. Okay, so where were we? We were looking at, yeah, we just talked through the scoring. So again, each game, in addition to network scoring, we will randomly select one of these 4 additional scoring things. Now, the 6 new factions come in 3 colors, so to speak. And they're there's a fire themed one and an ice themed one, hence fire and ice. So actually I think it's simpler to look at the ice factions first. Yes, they're listed first, because they're the most like normal factions. But both of the Volcano and the ice factions do not. You obviously the board still has 7 colors on it. So how do you pick a faction that? How do you pick a new faction without needing a new color? And the answer is you let them choose their color or change their color or not have a color. You know, kind of in terms of like terrain colors. So the ice factions are sort of the simplest. When you choose the ice faction, you also choose a color that you would like to treat as your home. And when you do so, other players can't choose that, just as if you had if I say, oh, I want to play the green Ice Maidens, then green is your home terrain, witches and Orin can't be in the game. You can't pick that if they're in the game, no one else can pick that if you've already picked green Ice Maidens, etc. And it's your home terrain for the rest of the game. Their digging is almost normal. Except that when transforming terrain to green, you instead transform it to ice, assuming you chose green. And if it's already green, you still have to pay a spade to turn it ice. Or you have to dig it somehow, which I guess is paying a spade. You get to place ice for free, of course, when you place your 2 initial dwellings. But after that, I can't just build on green tiles. I still have to dig them to turn them ice, even though they're my home terrain. So blue tiles are just as easy to settle on as green ones, because you have to dig either of them once to get them to be ice. Blue, goes this way and turns to ice at the same time. Green just turns to ice. Okay, so that's how the ice factions dig. Both ice and volcano tiles can never be transformed by another player. So once you get it transformed, it's not on the color wheel. How are they even going to figure out how to transform it, right? So it just can't be done. It's permanent, even if you haven't built a dwelling. Okay, so the 2 ice factions in the game are Ice Maidens, and they... Where is it? Oh, here. Okay. Yes, Ice Maidens. So when you start the game, you get a favor tile for free. And that's kind of their passive ability. The Stronghold ability is kind of like the Engineers, except instead of getting points for passing with bridges, you get points for passing with temples. We do, though, also need to look at their faction board, because it shows the amount of power and whatever they get, the amount of income, and they're not like these expansion factions are not all totally vanilla like, say, witches with just like a passive ability. They have changes to their income and so on. There is no good like graphical way to look at a faction board, so Snellman has written up like the stuff you can't tell from looking at the rule book. So we have to refer to 2 pages to see how they work. So Ice Maidens have just a tiny bit less power than usual. Normally you start with like 5-7 or perhaps even 9-3. And you start with, what is this? Water and air. Yep, makes sense. You get a favor tile, which, okay. Digging track costs 1 less worker, I guess to make up for the fact that you need to do more digging. Stronghold, okay, yeah. Produces 4 power, good to know. And all 8 of your dwellings produce a worker. Interesting. Okay. And Yetis are the other one, the other ice faction. They're kind of very, very excited about power and power actions is their like thing. So when you want to take a power action, you pay 1 less power. So for example, it costs you only 2 to make the priest instead of 3. It costs you only 3 to take the 7 coins instead of 4, so that's like insane. It costs you 5 for a double dig, which is obviously pretty good. And also your Stronghold and Sanctuary are a size 4 instead of size 3 when considering founding towns and getting Leech. So this is like, I really don't know what to do with that, because it really strongly discourages Fire too, of course, right? Because it's like not even possible to build a size 6 town that includes a Stronghold. It would have to be size 7 anyway. And a Sanctuary would have to be like Sanctuary Dwelling for Fire 2 to be good. So I guess you could take Fire 2 if you never build a Stronghold or a Sanctuary, but I don't know, it just seems like not very great. And your Stronghold ability is also related to power actions. You can take power actions even if they've already been taken. You can just take them as many times as you want. And when you take it, no one else can have it, just as normal. But like you don't get like your own private copy of them. You're just like allowed to take them, even if normally you couldn't. So plus Yeti's faction board, right? You start with more power than anyone else. Start with Earth and Air. Okay, I would have expected water for an ice faction, but okay, whatever. Discount on power. Yeah, it costs you less workers to get to dig. These are the kinds of things I'm going to forget. Yeah, you get 4 power, normal Stronghold cost, maybe a little low, I don't know. Normal Sanctuary cost. Yeah, so every trading post produces 2 power and 2 coins. So normally the first 2 produce only 1 power and the second 2 produce 2. For the Yetis, all of them produce 2. And you get workers for every dwelling. So they're very, very, very power heavy. They get a lot of power and they're good at spending power efficiently. So you really want to focus on power as the Yetis. Okay, so that's the ice factions. Next up, the volcano factions, sometimes called fire factions, I think. I don't know. They do not have a home terrain color. You choose, say, Dragon Lords. Here, there you go. It's enough that you can see Dragon Lords. Say you choose Dragon Lords. You don't choose a home color immediately. You wait for everyone to choose their faction, and then you declare your starting color. It's a starting color, not a home color, because it only matters when placing initial dwellings. After that, it has no meaning. And these factions do not use digs in the ordinary way to transform things. Instead, each of them has its own gimmick for how it transforms things, and it just turns them into volcanoes, sort of regardless of what color they were. It's more expensive in general to turn terrain that is an opponent's home terrain into a volcano. But it doesn't really have anything to do with how far away it was from your starting terrain, because again, it's not your home terrain. So if you say you pick Dragon Lords and witches and fakirs and giants are the other ones in the game, it's more expensive, and we'll talk about how that in more detail. You can turn any of the other 4 colors into your terrain for the cheap cost, but if you want to turn yellow, green, or red into your terrain, it costs the expensive amount. Okay? And just like ice, it can never be transformed once it's turned into volcano. And you can never partially transform because there's no like halfway to volcano. Whereas ice factions can partially transform if they want, because there is like kind of a halfway to ice thing. Okay, that's how volcanoes work. And something that like was not totally obvious to me is you don't get points for making volcano tiles because you don't use spades. So in particular, in the victory points for digging round, you don't get any for turning stuff into volcanoes because you're not digging. Okay, so the Dragon Lords, they do something kind of like burning power to transform. They have this like feature called removing power tokens. So from any one of your 3 bowls, you can take a token away and just throw it away permanently. And that'll transform something that's the cheap cost. So if you want to transform to a terrain that nobody else owns, you take away 1 power token permanently, and it's transformed. That's how you dig, instead of spending workers or whatever. The expensive cost is to spend 2 of them, so that's like really expensive, way more expensive. For the Acolytes, it's not as bad. The expensive cost is not that much worse than the cheap cost. You might, on the other hand, say, wow, the Dragon Lords get a big discount for doing the cheap version, whereas the Acolytes get a small discount. I don't know which one of those is the more accurate way to look at it. But anyway, the Dragon Lords are more encouraged not to mess with people's home terrains, but to mess maybe with their like neighboring terrains. So if you ever do get a spade, you get to gain 1 power and put it into bowl 1. So create a new power token and put it in bowl 1. Don't move any of your others, just put it there. And your stronghold ability is just like get 4 power. It varies by number of players, but we're always going to have 4. So it's like get 4 new power tokens into bowl 1. Simple enough. They're kind of, as I understand it from hearing people talk about Dragon Lords, they're kind of a disruptive faction the same way Giants are. If you see some faction who's going to have too easy a time, you might choose Dragon Lords just to mess with them and like pick one of their neighbors or something and start transforming stuff near them. Acolytes are the other Volcano faction. And they... Oh, we should look at the Dragon Lords... Here we go. So they start with less power than anybody, in a way. They have 4 and 4. And they start with 2 fire. So they start notice with less than 12. So if Dragon Lords can have more than 12 if you gain enough. Although, I guess since you can only ever gain 4 in a 4-player game... No, you can gain spades. So yeah, you get a bunch of power. And they don't get a base worker income, so like engineers. And also their 4th dwelling produces no worker income. And of course, just like most factions, their 8th dwelling also produces no workers. So they're kind of starved of workers, but not quite as badly as engineers. Right? Because engineers are missing 3 and 6. We're missing 4 and 8. Yeah, so slightly better than engineers, but not much. You remove power tokens. Yeah. Stronghold is like the slightly more expensive cost, and so is the Sanctuary. Yeah, so that's all there is to Dragon Lords. Acolytes are exciting. They start at 3 on every cult, which is why it has to mention this. You don't get power for your starting position, even though it's above a power line. And they pay cult steps in order to transform terrain to make a volcano. So if you want to choose the home terrain of another faction, then you pay 4 cult points in a single cult. If you want to transform something else, something that's not anyone's home terrain, you pay 3. Again, on a single cult. And you don't gain power for going... You don't gain or lose power for going down past power bars, but you do gain it again if you go back up. And their stronghold ability increases the usefulness of your priests by 1. So if you, say, got a stronghold down before anyone had sent the first priest to, say, air, your priest would be worth 4 instead of being worth 3. I played a couple games against the AI to get a hang of some of the expansion factions. I played a game with Acolytes where I sent all 7 of my priests to the cults by the end of the game, just to like, and I still, like, you know, the AI hardly ever sends any priests to cults. They're just awful at it. They finish at like, maybe one of them gets to 7 in something, maybe, but they're usually at like 3, 5. Anyway, I only got like 12 cult points despite sending all 7 of my priests to cults. So Acolytes really burn through their cult points to dig, it seems to me, as a novice. Acolytes, yeah, they start with 6/6, which is slightly... That's the same as Ice Maidens, isn't it? Yeah. So slightly below the norm. but really, really great cults. Same worker setup as Dragon Lords. Same cost for buildings. Pay cult steps, yeah, 3 or 4. Right, gaining a spade is worth a single cult step, so it's kind of interesting in that, like, compare Acolytes and Dragon Lords. The Dragon Lords, a spade is very often worth transforming a terrain for them. So they're much better at digging using spades than Acolytes are. I don't know if that's necessarily, like, how you should do things with them, but, like, cult steps that are worth a dig are pretty valuable because you get a power which you can use to dig anything you want. Whereas for the Acolytes, it's only like a third of the dig, typically, because you just get a cult step. On the other hand, having more of a cult can be useful for other reasons because you can, like, get some other cult income with it, maybe. I don't know. Yep. Okay, so that's all the Volcano factions. And by the way, like, I've looked at, like, how strong each of these tend to be on fjords, and most of the expansion factions are not played very much, or I don't know. They don't seem that good, right? The change to fjords kind of, and the inclusion of expansion features changes the balance in the base game. Like, apparently witches are great, who knew? But they've always been okay. Darklings are still good. Chaos magicians are a lot better than previously. I guess there must be good red terrain, or maybe there's bad yellow, or something like that. So this is all pretty normal, except the engineers took a huge hit. They were very dependent on there being good terrain on the base map. And, you know, so most of the stuff down here is, like, stuff you don't even play that much normally. Except that, like, mermaids are... Recall that the map just, like, doesn't have much crisscrossing rivers. There's just, like, having a lot of shipping is not that useful to you. All the exciting stuff and all the leech happens in the heart of those giant continents. So anyway, we're looking through the expansion factions, but I think they actually don't get played all that much. They're kind of all below average on fjords, but not by a ton. So if there's a good reason to pick one, I'd like to be alert to it. That's all. The variable factions, I think Shapeshifters... I'm actually really surprised to see Shapeshifters up here. I thought they were generally regarded as much worse than Riverwalkers, but I guess Fjords is really bad for Riverwalkers. So if we look at, like, the original map, Riverwalkers are much better than Shapeshifters. They're, like, okay, although kind of bad. And we could look at, like, show me games by only, like, kind of good players. But, yeah. So Riverwalkers, we'll look at them, but they're just awful with the river set up on fjords. And Dragon Lords are actually, like, sort of playable on fjords, apparently, by good players. But we've done so much narrowing that there are just not that many games. So all of this is not super statistically significant. Anyway, Shapeshifters choose a home terrain when they are placed. And they can change their home terrain throughout the game. And you can never change to anyone else's home terrain. But, how do you change it? You, like... it's a stronghold ability. Okay. So they get their passive ability is when someone gains power from you building in the same trigger conditions as cultists, but instead of gaining a cult step for free, you pay a victory point to gain a power directly into Bowl 3, you know, from the general supply. And just like cultists, if your neighbors choose not to do that, then you gain 1 power the normal way. So your stronghold ability is the more weird one. You gain the ability to change your home terrain so that you can start building on some other terrain for free. Again, you can't reuse someone else's terrain type. You pay for this either by paying 5 power in the normal way, or by removing 5 power tokens the same way that Dragon Lords transform stuff, by removing power token. And just like the Engineer's Bridge action, this is an action you can do as often as you like, provided you've built a stronghold. And I don't know, that's obviously a huge investment, but in principle it could unlock some pretty exciting stuff. You maybe like build a bunch of red, and then you're like, okay, I'm ready to start, like, I don't want to pay a bunch of digs to turn all this gray stuff red, let's just turn it myself gray instead, I guess. So I don't know the strategy of when to do that. Seems difficult to do, but what, you know, I don't have to pick Shapeshifters. So they start with the same power as Dragon Lords, so it's quite low. Start with fire and water, yeah. And they can't upgrade digging at all. Interesting. What else? Your stronghold costs only 3 workers. How weird is that? So it's cheaper than a normal stronghold. Yeah, and Shapeshifters have been nerfed to hell since they were first released. You can see there's like 4 rule changes in here that all make Shapeshifters weaker, because they were just too good. And I believe Riverwalkers were also too good. And finally, whew, what a long video. The last expansion faction, Riverwalkers. You choose a starting terrain, just like Shapeshifters, and you place on it and can build on it. But the Riverwalkers are weird. Like, they gain no benefit of any kind from getting spades. You just have to throw them away. It's not even like the Dragon Lords or the Cult or the Acolytes, where you gain something else for getting spades. You just gain nothing. So in order to, you start out being able to build only on your home terrain. But and you start with only 1 priest in your supply. The rest of your priests are sort of like, in a physical game, they would be covering up spaces on the terrain wheel. Every time you gain a priest from your supply, you can choose to just gain the priest as normal if you have enough available, or you can pay coins to, instead of gaining the priest, unlock another terrain type that you're allowed to build on. Just as with the other other variable factions, it's more expensive to choose a terrain someone else has as their home terrain. If you choose to unlock a terrain that is not someone else's home terrain, it costs you 1 coin in addition to the priest you're not getting. If you want someone else's home terrain, it costs you 2 coins in addition to the priest you're not getting. Your shipping, yes. Your shipping starts at 1 and cannot be upgraded, although you can still use the shipping bonus tile to temporarily give yourself some. And when building, you must use your shipping to get someplace. You cannot, like, build something that you're directly adjacent to if your shipping can't get you there. So for example, starting from this tile here, if you have 1 shipping, you can build here because you could go through this tile. But you can't go here because there's no way for your shipping to get you there, even though it's right next to one of your dwellings. So they have to live next to the river, and they typically use their shipping, which is only 1, to kind of like creep along the river. I don't know how important having 2 shipping for a while is for them. Who knows? And since their stuff is so often across rivers from each other, your stronghold ability is build 2 bridges to help you finish up your towns. Because it would be quite difficult to build all along a single bank of a bridge or a river or whatever. Or if you had a particularly narrow continent, you could build here and here, like this one, right? You could build here, then you might not need a bridge. But in general, you will need them, and especially on fjords where there's not a lot of terrain shaped like this, narrow bands with river on both sides. But the good news is we don't have to worry about how Riverwalkers work because they are trash on fjords. So there you go. And we can look at their faction board. They're actually quite strong, I believe, on the base map, which is why they have such a miserable power start. And weird. So they do have the starting dwelling producing, or the starting worker income for no dwellings, but like engineers, the third and sixth produce no income. All right. But also like the engineers, your second temple gives you power instead of a priest. Half star next to rivers. Yeah, when you gain a priest, you can pay a coin to instead unlock more terrain. Sanctuary and Stronghold cost 6 coins. There you go. So that's everything there is to know about the Fire and Ice factions, I think. How well they play on fjords is kind of, I don't know. I've never played against humans on fjords. I've never played Fire and Ice against humans. I've only played like 5 games of the expansion in my life. I played as Yetis also. I was sort of under the impression that Yetis and Acolytes were the most played of the expansion factions. And that is true on the base map, but not on fjords. So I was kind of practicing the wrong things there. On fjords, they all kind of suck, but Dragon Lords are playable, I guess. It's my understanding. Shapeshifters are bad, but maybe playable. The others are, I don't know. I'm not a good enough player to pick anything this bad, right? You know, you look in there in like the Giants tier. So, and also, oh, interesting. Engineers are, wait, what was I looking at? Interesting. Engineers get worse when considering all games, but when you look at only games of good players, engineers are still totally playable. They're fine. I see. And then if you look at 1250 players, it's like there's just so few games, who knows? One thing I did want to mention is the fact that there is this new extra scoring tends to encourage a more economic approach and less points-based favor tiles. The points-based favor tiles are still quite good. You know, Earth 1 is still hotly contested, as I understand it. And Water 1 is still good, but it's not like in base where Water 1 gets all 3 taken every game, I think. Because there is a way to get 18 more points by just leveraging your economy in the right way. So there's more rewards for getting an economy, and by taking a scoring favor tile, you are deliberately handicapping your economy, right? You could argue, is a priest better than 2 coins and a power when you upgraded the trading post to a temple? No, it's definitely not, but you could argue it. The real thing is, like, when you build a temple, if you wanted to, you could have taken an econ tile, like a priest and a 3 coins income. That's obviously more income than a priest. So if you take a priest and a points favor tile, you're sort of saying, I want some points instead of the 3 coins for Fire 1 or the worker for Earth 1 or whatever. Worker and power. So, given that there's more ways to leverage your economy, my understanding is players take Water 1 a little bit less often. I don't know how much less often, and like the average number of points you get from final scoring is only 9, because there's 36 points to go around and there's 4 players to share it, so it's like not a lot, but that could be enough to like tip the balance towards econ in some game where you were, anyway. And there's other kind of interesting stuff like Fakirs become playable if, especially when number of disconnected settlements is around, because they're so good at flying all over the place, making non-connected structures. Cheaply, because you can just land on existing yellow tiles, which most factions can't do. They don't tend to have easily accessible river tiles that can reach each other. I don't know when they're playable, but it's a thing to think about that really never was a thing to think about in the base. So I think that's it for our announcement, update, intro to Fire and Ice. I'm gonna go start recording my faction selection videos for Fire and Ice, and you guys can watch them in the future, or maybe probably right now, right? Because I said you can click the link. I don't think I can make the link appear again now. Maybe I can. I don't know how YouTube works. But anyway, so look forward to more Terra Mystica than you were expecting coming up soon, because we're not having to wait another month for the next season of the Ordinary Tournament. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.